So it was you, Mrs. Kent, who had to answer most of the abusive telephone calls made by the accused.
Nearly all of them, except the first few. Miss Joss told me about them. She was that upset.
Miss who?
Miss Joss. That's what I call her, Mrs. Beddington. She's a sweet girl, and I don't like to think of her married to that awful man. But she's getting divorced from him, isn't she?
Yes. So, Mrs. Bennington was the one who told you about the telephone calls and the letters?
Oh, yes. Mr. Clements would have kept it from me. He'd think I'd be shocked, perhaps. But when you've seen life as I have, there's not much can shock you. That's what I said to him. I said, I'm not shocked. You don't want to worry about me. And then I insisted on answering the telephone whenever it rang. I didn't see why he should be bothered with all that filthy rubbish, a busy man like him. And besides, I didn't want Miss Joss any more upset than she was already. Or Miss Isabel, of course.
Is that Mrs. Clements?
Yes, that's right. Not that she was at home very much to answer the telephone. She's always out and about the country with those committees and the rest of it.
Yes. So from then on, you took all the telephone calls?
Yes. And opened all those nasty letters. It was easy to recognize them by the envelopes. They were always the same. And they were always the same inside. Just the same thing. Just the one sentence. I opened them all and I burned them all.
Could you tell us the kind of things that the accused said on the telephone?
Oh, I wouldn't like to say that here. Not in the law courts, not in public. Your Worship, do I have to say all those horrible things out loud?
No, Mrs. Kent, that won't be necessary. If you could just give us an idea, as Mr. Lotterby says, of the kind of things that were said.
Oh, thank you. They were all obscene. And lies. Dreadful things about Mr. Clements and Miss Joss.
Mrs. Kent, can you remember the last telephone call you took?
Oh, yes. It was the night he started the fire at our house.
Mrs. Kent, it is for the jury to determine whether or not Mr. Bennington started the fire. I'm sure you know that in British law, a man is innocent until he is proved guilty.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Worship. I mean, on the night I think he started the fire.
Mrs. Kent, do you remember what time this last telephone call was made?
Oh, yes. It was about 5 minutes past 4. I know because I always have my tea at 4 o'clock and listen to today's short story on the wireless. It had only been going for a few minutes when the telephone rang. I didn't expect it to be him. He generally rang in the evening. But he couldn't ring after midnight because I took the receiver off.
Was there anything else unusual about this particular telephone call, Mrs. Kent? Did he say anything special, anything different from usual?
Yes. He said, tell them they better be careful. Tell them they'd be sorry. Tell them they better watch out. And he kept on saying it over and over again.
And on this occasion, was it your opinion that he was drunk?
Oh, yes. Rather worse than usual, if anything.
Now, about the things that the accused said the other times on the telephone and in the letters, the things against Mr. Clements and Mrs. Bennington. Are you in a position, Mrs. Kent, to repudiate all these suggestions?
Oh, no, I certainly am not.
You aren't, Mrs. Kent?
Oh, no, indeed, I couldn't possibly repudiate them. Repudiate them? Why, they were all lies. Not a scrap of truth in it. What? Mr. Clements and Miss Joss? They wouldn't dream of a thing like that. Wouldn't dream of it.
Yes, I see. Thank you, Mrs. Kent. Now, were you always in the house on the occasions when Mrs. Bennington spent the night in the spare room?
Oh, yes. I was always there. Well, it wouldn't be right not to be, would it? I mean, it wouldn't be proper, the two of them alone in the house. That would start nasty tongues. People love a bit of scandal, don't they? Oh, no, there's no chance of that. I was always there.
And where is the spare room, Mrs. Kent?
Well, it's just opposite my bedroom, just across.
Thank you, Mrs. Kent.
Mrs. Kent, I take it that you can be absolutely sure that Mr. Bennington's last telephone call was at precisely 5 minutes past 4.
Yes, 4:05, that's right.
Was your room very far from that of Mr. Clement's room? I said, Mrs. Kent, was your room very far from Mr. Clement's room?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
You hard of hearing, Mrs. Kent?
I am not. My hearing's as good as anybody's, and my eyesight, why, I don't even wear spectacles. None of my family have ever been deaf.
I see. My question concerned the geography of the house. How far away was your room, and that of the spare room opposite, of course, from Mr. Clement's room?
Well, it's just along the landing. Mr. Clement's room is at the top of the stairs. About 15 yards or thereabout.
See. Have you been with the Clements family long?
Oh, yes. From a year after they were married when Miss Tessa was born. And I was nanny to Miss Isabel when she was born, and Miss Frances, rest her soul.
Miss Frances?
She was Miss Isabel's sister. She's dead, poor little dear.
So you've been with the Clements family a long time?
Coming up to 16 years next month.
And you've known Mrs. Bennington for about a year, have you? Mrs. Kent, I just asked you a question. You are hard of hearing, aren't you? And one of the things you didn't hear was Mrs. Bennington's footsteps as she moved to and from Mr. Clement's room on the nights that she stayed at the Eaton Square house.
Footsteps? Miss Joss? I didn't hear any because there weren't any. My hearing's as good as anybody's. She's just not that sort.
In your opinion, she's not that sort.
In my opinion. I've brought up 7 children in my time, and the first time I saw Miss Joss, I knew her inside out. She was the image of my Miss Frances about the eyes, and she was the truest little soul ever born. Only 17 years old.
Mrs. Kent, please.
It's not right. A young girl like that killing herself, it wasn't right. If only Miss Isabel had told me about those pills, it never would have happened.
Mrs. Kent, Mr. O'Connell, please.
Mrs. Kent, I wonder if you could tell us once again what Mr. Bennington said to you on the phone that day of the fire.
Tell them they'd better look out. I'll get them. Tell them they'll be sorry.
Now, I have here that he said, tell them they'd better be careful, tell them they'll be sorry, just tell them to watch out.
Yes, that's right. That's what he said.
Thank you, Mrs. Kent. I've no further questions, my lord.